We just know that the way the brain works, material doesn't stick unless you learn it a very specific way.
Sam, I'm excited to chat with you today about 1huddle. To begin, can you describe your company and your purpose in 5 seconds? Really brief. What is it?
Training that doesn't suck. How was that?
I love it. I mean, couldn't get any shorter than that. Training that doesn't suck. So talk to me, like, what was the initial problem that you saw? You're like, I need to solve this, that led to 1huddle.
I spent my whole career in sales, managing sales teams. And a lot of the stops I made along the way, we were always hiring young sales reps right out of college. And I felt like it was getting harder and harder to get a new sales hire on day one that was ready to step in and sell. It's just getting harder and harder. Colleges aren't teaching the right stuff. Companies, try to deploy onboarding training like we're stuck in the 1980s. It's, watch the module, take a quiz, here's a manual. It just doesn't, lock you in a classroom for a week. And that stuff just didn't work. So I would say that really is what got me going. The idea of 1huddle was to take everything an employee needs to know, put it into a game as a vehicle to make it more fun, more sticky, which we can talk about in a second. But to make, at the end of the day, get information from a company into the employee's head so that they can do the right thing the right way every single time they're in front of a customer.
So tell me more about this gamification. How does it work? Why is it different than anything else out there?
Sure. So we believe that competition is a good thing, and science will back us up. The problem with why you forget most of what you learn, the reason any of your listeners, if I were to quiz you on the last book you read, you might say, I probably won't do that great at it. But in the moment, I remembered it was really, it stuck with me. But we just know that the way the brain works, material doesn't stick unless you learn it a very specific way. So, when I started building the platform, I was looking for, how do you make material stickier in the learning process? And I kept coming around this concept called struggle and struggle-based learning, where you essentially test somebody on something before they have ever seen the material. And while you're going to fail the first time, when you continue to test and you struggle in difficulty, eventually you learn it. And once you know it, you can't forget it. And once we knew that, we said, what can we wrap this thing in? Because nobody wants to take a bunch of tests. And this is where the game, kind of the game layer came in. We said, let's take this testing model, plug it into a game experience where employees log in. They don't log in to learn. Like, I'm logging in to beat Alexander today. And if we can make it feel more like fantasy sports or more like a consumer experience, because most corporate technology, it's totally night and day compared to what we consume as consumers every day. It's like the tech experience is great as a consumer, but you go to work and you can't understand why your payroll platform can't tell you what you're getting paid. It's just like everything is so disconnected. So we said, let's take a consumer game and wrap this thing around it and use competition as a way to get people to care about training. And it's really tough to get a message from HR all the way down to the frontline employees. And unfortunately, it doesn't always get all the way down to them. So doing a lot, especially during COVID for large enterprise companies, that the fact that our product is mobile is obviously very relevant given the moment. But in a post-COVID world, everything's got to be in the pocket of the employee. Otherwise, you're not for certain you're going to be able to reach them.
The ability to quickly create one of these probably is paramount. Tell me more about that creation process and who uses it inside these companies.
Yeah, I mean, I've been blown away at how you look at the rest of the HR e-learning ecosystem of tech companies, and they're stuck in this yesterday concept that content is king. And while I agree from a marketing perspective, content's really valuable. The perspective that only one person inside of the company can build it is crazy. And you think about in your company, you have an HR person, someone in charge of learning or talent, and they're tasked with either buying pre-built content from like LinkedIn Learning or any iteration of that, or they have to be the one to create it. we look at the world as the fact that we can turn a company that has 1,000 employees into 1,000 content creators with 1huddle. So you can, with 1huddle, you can literally open the app, build a game in minutes, swipe right, and your entire sales team could be pinged with a game that they have to play today. And that's, that seems simple, but it's really big, especially when you think about categories like restaurants. Anybody who's ever worked in a restaurant knows you do that, you do your pre-shift huddle 4 or 5 o'clock before service. Chef's going to tell you what's the menu, what's the specials, what do you need to talk about? People are generally on their phone, looking around, doing other things, not zoned in. So with 1huddle, chef at 12 o'clock can take snapshots of tonight's menu, send it out in minutes, and expect all of the front of house and back of house staff to be already played that game before service. They're already ready to go. So we're just cutting out all that the middle ground that happens. So authoring is big. Anybody that is in an organization with 1huddle can have the ability to build training around their job as a subject matter expert.
You already mentioned 2 years ago you've made that adjustment. Look, tell me about where are you now, and what's the plan, the near future, next year to 5 years?
Yeah, great question. We've been growing super fast. The COVID moment has been really interesting for us because gameplay just soared on our platform overnight. We had companies that saw 10, 12, 13x increases in participation, not just because employees, this was the only way they could stay in communicate, or one of the only ways they could stay in communication, but companies are really struggling right now, not to train, but to keep people together. Like my team and a lot of other teams I know, the fact that you don't go to the office and interact and have that in-between time, that water cooler moment, to grab coffee, walk down the street, that doesn't happen. That's really tough. So, we've seen a lot of new uses of our platform. Next 4 to 5 years for us, I'd be crazy to say I know the answer to the question completely, but I do know, what we're trying to do every day in the months ahead are to be a platform for every worker. And there's a digital divide today, and there's definitely inequalities today in society that exist. And one of the places that I've been so surprised to see it as well is in who gets access to workforce training. If you are a frontline worker at Home Depot, you get access to a fraction of the training that the general manager does. And the only reason that is because the company doesn't want to invest in technology. It's not the information. We're in the information age. It's as simple as just making something accessible on their mobile device that they can then consume. So what we're fighting for every day is to make sure that from the frontline worker to the corner office, let everybody compete. To your point on competition, like, may the best person win.
Where can people go to learn more, and what's a good first step that they can take?
Sure. If you want to learn a little bit more about our platform, we have a free trial that you can access on our website. You can go to 1huddle.co. That's the number 1huddle, like a football huddle.co. And you can sign up for a free trial to check out some of our best games, depending on your industry. If you have a business, I guarantee you we have some pathway for you with different games that might be able to help your business, whether it's onboarding or compliance training or COVID safety stuff. We got a lot of really good stuff. So I would send you to check us out at 1huddle, and you can always connect with me as well.
Be sure to check out part 2 of my conversation with Sam, in which he tells of how one frustrating training workshop led him to start his own tech startup, despite knowing nothing about technology.